manic. Like, I had to break up fights. Actually, my life is being threatened here. Actually, I've had to climb up a tree to get away from a rhino. I'm actually in a hospital in Indonesia, being told that I'm going to be here for 7 days and I've got dengue fever. One crazy story. It was actually my last night in Ghana. Basically got kidnapped. I got held hostage. Your car has to be broken on the time I get kidnapped. I'm being told that we're going to jail for 7 years. It was awful. Two men screaming at us, we're under arrest and we're breaking the law and we're going to jail for 7 years. And I was freaked out. Ghana completely changed my perspective on religion, from negative to positive. A lot of people actually have a misconception about me. A lot of my friends were very, very left-wing, but that's a really tricky one. Oh my god. Yeah, my dad is an entrepreneur. Like, tens of thousands of people have died in the production of this metal. As consumers, we're so removed. Yeah, you've taken the words out of my mouth. Please, please, please go and volunteer abroad. That was a very, very low point in my life. So much more impactful than any Cambridge offer. Like everything I did there was, I felt like in my element. I was 18 and I was working as a volunteer teacher. But yeah, I just want to say thank you. I love this podcast. Like, I think it's so cool to there's so many really interesting people who do a very good job at bringing that out of people and asking the right questions.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffee's on me, David Quan, where I strive to give guests legacy-worthy interviews that listeners can enjoy while cooking, commuting, relaxing, or walking their pets. My guest today is enjoying an iced tea, different to a coffee, but hopefully the coolness of the iced tea helps carry the conversation. I had quite a wobbly week, but just some reflective periods over this weekend, calling friends and family, and lots of prayers that I think have been really, really helpful and given me a new sense of direction and purpose, and I now feel very rejuvenated for this conversation. I feel very blessed that we are now approaching 100,000 podcast downloads, and I see my guests giving me the thumbs up every once in a while, which is good. Please know that I don't take any of your time, feedback, and support for granted, because when I started this Passion Project podcast at a low point of my time in Cambridge, I was genuinely motivated by 3 founding ideals. Number 1, purpose of giving. Number 2, learning from others. And number 3, sharing of stories. These 3 aspirations still make up the content description for every single episode. Indeed, the opportunities to strive to give my courageous and insightful guests legacy-worthy interviews over coffee, tea, bubble tea or water, despite my many inadequacies, have been a tremendous privilege that imbues me with gratitude. I know that I will listen and look back to laugh at how naive I am. But if you have been enjoying the discussions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, thank you. And please do consider leaving a review and nominating a guest by contacting me via my Linktree, David Quan. Seeing this podcast on people's Spotify Wraps, receiving positive messages about the guests give me tremendous fulfillment, and I cannot thank all my wonderful guests enough for their courage and insights. I genuinely maintain the deep conviction that this passion project, if wholly true to those founding motivations about giving, learning, and sharing, is a worthwhile pursuit. So now on to my incredibly humble, cool, passionate guest. Andre Pancholi is a second-year geography student at Homerton College, University of Cambridge. His primary interests centre around sustainability, politics, ecology, identity, developmental economics, and climate change. Motivated by his desire to see a non-environmentally destructive developmental trajectory for the Earth within our lifetime, he has been a part of several grassroots environmental initiatives, including a community-wide beach clean while volunteering in Ghana, as well as a school-wide tree planting day in his local borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. He has also written several articles on how social media and the internet can empower individuals to drive global social justice movements across the world, with one of these articles winning the prestigious John Locke Essay Prize for Politics and a scholarship of £2,000 alongside publication in an academic journal. Keen to put his ideas into action, after finishing school he decided to take a gap year, spending almost 6 months living abroad working as a voluntary teacher in Ghana and Nepal. There, he gained insight into the developmental challenges and successes of rural communities in the developing world. Now a university student, he is keen to involve himself in as many different sides of university life as possible, from being a choral scholar of Homerton College, welfare officer of his college's JCR, to being the vice president of the Geography Society. Outside of university, singing and music in general have been important constants throughout his life, and he has been performing in various capacities since the age of 8. Coming from a multicultural background, as well as being the son of a serial entrepreneur, he reflects on how his upbringing has shaped his future career and life ambitions. Having now completed his first year at Cambridge, he has learned a lot from his first year at Cambridge, not only in an academic sense, but also socially and mentally. Andre, delighted to have you here. Welcome to my podcast, Coffees on Me, David Quan.
Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted. So you were nominated. I'm just going to read out the nomination for first, just for your sake. I think it would be nice to keep in the recording.
Cool.
My dear friend Andre is a wonderful, kind, insightful, and extremely reflective person. As someone who did a gap year travelling abroad, he has lots of crazy stories to share. He is one of the most driven people I know, who has a wide range of interests but is super passionate about his subject, geography, and how it interacts with social issues, sustainability, and business. He's also extremely involved in extracurriculars, Vice President of Cambridge Geography Society, Choral Scholar, and nominated as a prestigious BNOC. No, prestigious was not in the word. As a BNOC.
Yeah.
He is a truly inspiring figure, and I'd love to hear him on the podcast. His Instagram is that, and he's second year at Homerton. Pretty high praise. How do you feel about it?
Feels nice. Thank you, Angelina, for that. That's very, very, very sweet. Thank you.
Have you listened to previous episodes of the podcast?
Yeah, so one of the big motivators that made me kind of say yes to coming on was listening to Angelina's podcast, actually. I really, really enjoyed it. It was actually quite strange, to be honest, because it was like, it sounded, obviously it's a podcast, it's on Spotify, and you're listening to someone speak about their life, but it was exactly like my conversations that I have with her. So it felt like very natural, but it was on Spotify. It was like a weird kind of mind thing. I really enjoyed it. And then, two of my other close friends, Keely and Sophie, have also been on the podcast as well. So,
They are incredible. And I'm sure they will be listening to this as well.
I hope so.
So, you've had such a tremendous, first year at Cambridge, being involved in a variety of different things. Mm-hmm. You've also had some interesting experiences in your gap year and some of your personal life. There's a lot that we can delve into.
Sure.
Do you have a particular area that you feel like would be a good starting point?
Yeah, I guess maybe the kind of like academic side, we could break down that first,
okay.
And then...
So I actually had a read through of your published article, Imagined Online Communities, the Digital Disruption of Traditional Geographies of Citizenship. I was so impressed. I mean, I haven't read much academics recently because of moving to London and starting work, but reading it actually reminded me a lot of my third year papers on like transnational sociology. Mm-hmm. In there you talked about like, that imagined community by Anderson, and that was one of the citations that I actually used.
Cool.
It was really cool how even in high school, like equivalently 5 years before I was doing transnational sociology at uni, you were able to communicate ideas in such a sophisticated and succinct way. So well done to you, but academically you've achieved a lot, and where do you want to start with that?
So I always think like, it's really cool to see stuff. I'm very much like a social media person. I consume a lot of information through social media. And I think social media was the big reason as to why I got involved in environmentalism. I was seeing videos of kind of the Amazon burning when I was 16, and it's quite a almost like gut-wrenching thing to see when you're just kind of scrolling through your phone, and that's kind of what really hooked me on social media. I'm sorry, not on social media, environmentalism. And that was actually kind of what inspired me to write that article. Mm. So I talk a lot about these kind of global online citizenships that kind of transcend borders. So citizenships that anyone around the world can kind of identify. And Anderson, with his kind of theory of imagined community, was kind of talking about the nation state and how these kind of socially imagined states form by like kind of shared value systems. But I kind of wanted to apply that on like a global scale and almost kind of like refute it almost. For global issues like climate change, Black Lives Matter, the kind of Me Too movement, things like that, we're seeing that these issues are not confined by borders. They're actually kind of global issues, and there's people all around the world, I guess within the constraints of digital access and access to social media, but there are people all over the world campaigning and sharing these ideals. So to me, these are kind of global, online, digitally dispersed citizenships. So it was kind of an interesting experience for me to apply what I was kind of living, i.e. engaging with environmental stuff on social media, and then kind of applying that to like writing an article on it and using kind of traditional sociology and political theory to kind of contrast that, if that makes sense.
It's really interesting how you brought in kind of, social contract, one of the cool like philosophical underpinnings. And I was wondering, when you were drafting this essay, how did you go about finding the connection between different key ideas?
It was an interesting one. It actually took me a really long time. It took a lot of walks through my neighborhood and like kind of doing a bit. So I had the way I did it was I had a core idea. I wanted to talk about social media and how it's enabling people to share ideas across borders. That was the kind of core idea. And there really wasn't that much literature on it. There really wasn't that much kind of out there that was discussing it, because it really is such a contemporary issue. There was like maybe 3 articles that I could find that were directly relevant. So I kind of had to think outside the box a bit and look at kind of more traditional theories and kind of use them as a basis to kind of build my argument on. So I looked at kind of social contracts, imagined communities, and things like that. And I actually found those really useful and a really interesting starting point. And to be honest, I kind of argued that some of those theories, while really useful at describing what I was talking about, are actually somewhat outdated in terms of the kind of way that they were being used, which is only natural because a lot of them were written in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, so only natural. But yeah, it was an interesting
obviously
process.
This article was written in 2021. You've now done a year at university, and hopefully some of your ideas may have changed. And one of the questions in particular, more specifically, does the modality of cyberspace spell the end of geography in informing concepts of citizenship in favour of a contested terrain of competing online discourses? You studied a year of geography. Either this question or other questions or ideas that you've raised, what about your views have changed?
Yeah, I was kind of quite critical of geography because of the internet. I think the internet is something that transcends borders and transcends seas, transcends land. It allows people to engage over borders, and the kind of, I guess, in that point in my life, 2021, I was kind of thinking, is geography still something that's worth studying? Because we're all so connected. In an instant, we can just message someone who's living in South Korea instantly, or someone in Brazil can message someone in Kazakhstan instantly. So we've eliminated that kind of spatial element towards kind of like community formation through like, but one thing that I did look at in that report, and I counteracted myself a little bit, was the digital
inequality, digital divide.
The digital divide, yeah, that's a huge thing. And one major issue with the digital divide, with what I was kind of talking about, is that obviously a lot of the world don't have access to the same kind of information technology that people in developed countries do. And that is almost kind of excluding them, in a sense, from like participating in some of these social movements. So, for example, while kind of Greta Thunberg, for example, who's someone I've written about quite a lot in some of these articles, while she's able to use social media and campaign and connect with people and visit, maybe a young girl in Mali wouldn't be able to do the same. So it's kind of, while the internet is breaking down kind of geographies through kind of, and cyberspace is almost kind of on the rise, I do think that we still have a long way to go, and the digital divide really is the limiting factor here.
So I guess from a sociological perspective then, there are lots of conflicts that happen, and in there, you mentioned like the Arab Spring, you mentioned about like environmental, economic conflicts, you mentioned about, there are other conflicts associated with like gender, race, etc. But it seems like here, with what you're saying at the the digital divide at the end, ultimately, the access is limited by people's socioeconomic conditions. So it's almost taking a Marxist lens that in the final analysis, it all comes down to class inequality and the opportunities that stem from differential economic issues. Does that describe your overall worldview, that it's ultimately comes down to economics and you take a Marxist school of thought?
Economic and political, I would say. So, for example, it's not just the digital divide and access to technology. I kind of talk about horizontal information dissemination in that article. So I talk about how in some places social media allows communication between people freely across the world. However, not everywhere in the world has free access to the internet and communication. I mean, this is the extreme example, but North Korea. Even if you're very wealthy in North Korea, you're not going to be able to engage in some of these global social issues due to, I guess, political isolationism. So I guess it's economic and political, I would say, not just economic.
Right. And I guess from that perspective then, do you feel like there is an ideal that we as a species, as humanity, should strive towards? Is it that everyone has equal access to social media, or should we limit social media? Should we regulate it? Like, social media has evolved so much since the time even you've written about this article with, Twitter no longer being called Twitter.
God,
So either then or now, where do you see social media heading, and also what is social media meant to achieve?
I think social media, in a world today, we're increasingly seeing the rise of global issues. So as I mentioned before, like Black Lives Matter, Me Too, climate change, and issues that kind of unite us across the world. One thing that's happening in one place, for example, Ukraine conflict, is affecting us everywhere, right? So I think social media is almost a global response to like global issues. And I think it's going to continue to rise because I believe we're going to see an increasing rate of kind of global issues. And yeah, I think it's going to just grow in influence. One thing, I guess one negative byproduct that I talk about in the article is this kind of polarization that social media as a kind of mechanism for information sharing has kind of caused.
Because it creates like an echo chamber, right, where like, the social network, like we get fed the very data that stimulates us, because it's ultimately driven by that capitalist system of profit driven.
Yeah, I mean, it's an algorithm, right? You're kind of for these social media companies to get your engagement, they're going to feed you what you want to see, right? So whether that be kind of information from within your kind of political views, or information that has, I guess, like a political slant on it. So if you're, for example, a Marxist, you're going to be engaging in Marxist spaces online. And you're probably going to be quite far removed from, I guess, like, I don't know, the Brexit agenda. Do you know what I mean? Like, or the Brexit kind of online communities that were kind of rallying for that. Yeah. Or I guess people are in their own echo chamber. And I think in recent years, we've seen this with Brexit. We've seen this in politics. We've seen a huge polarization on social issues. Because people are being fed the information that they want to see, they're taking more extreme views than ever before, in my opinion.
And it also, I guess, leads to like preaching to the converted. Once you identify that group of people, you know how to tailor your message to get them even more extreme. So we all have our biases, though, of course. We all have our natural tendencies informed by our own experiences and our personal viewpoints. If you were to be critical of yourself, which bubble are you most likely falling into, for better or for worse?
I think I've grown up with parents and friends, and I guess like I surround myself actively with people with very, very liberal views, probably quite left-wing as well. A lot of my friends are very, very left-wing and take a very strong stance on that, and I've actually really enjoyed that, because I guess I went to a private school in London. And there was, I guess, not that same... A lot of my friends were very, very left-wing, but not everyone was like that there. There were quite a lot of people with some not amazing views. And I think I'm quite...
Could you unpack the word or the phrase "not amazing views"? What does that mean? Are some views inherently better than others?
In my opinion, yes, when you're excluding people. So I felt like... I think the main thing to me is tolerance, right? Tolerance is something that kind of... I know it's you've got me that, right? So, okay. So tolerance to me is the most important thing. And it trumps a lot of other things for me. Accepting people and taking people for what they are. And being conscious of I guess the disadvantages that some people might have and how people might feel when walking into a room, you know?
So you're saying this exclusion may come not just from our action, but from our inaction as well.
Yeah. So I think I'm
and are we all guilty?
Yeah. I think we're all like extremely guilty because we come from a certain place. You know, we're exposed to certain things. We all have upbringings. And, you know, like, I think just at the end of the day, I think we can all, politics aside, I think we can all respect people from like a kind of basic level.
The fundamental values.
Yeah, and just be kind of kind to people, I think, and take people for how they want to present, how they want to come across, and what they have to say. And I think my kind of, going back to, I guess, my own echo chamber, as we were kind of talking about it, I think sometimes doesn't deliver on that kind of ideal of tolerance. For example, like I've seen, I think sometimes there were times where I've really judged people for coming from a different place than me, or having different views and not really taking the time to understand it. And that's because I'm almost part of my own, I actively contribute to my own echo chamber, if that makes sense.
We all do.
Like we all do, and it's kind of, I think the internet, going back to that, has really facilitated that. Like I actively engage myself in kind of online in like social justice spaces because that's what I find interesting. And it's also, to be honest, looking at it kind of critically, it's what I want to see, right? I want to see people take critical views on climate change. I want to see, I mean, I think they should. I mean, that's very core to me, but I want to see that. So I guess I guess in a sense that we all kind of come, but I do think that like kind of there should be a kind of baseline of like respect, kindness and tolerance, I think.
So from the lens of your eyes and your current positionality, is the world more kind, tolerant and generous than not?
That's a tricky one. I think that's a really tricky one. Is the world more, could you repeat the question?
Basically, do you think the world is more kind, tolerant and good, or the good things that you want to mention, is it more of that than not? Obviously it's not completely and all the time, but is it more good than not good?
I would say I feel differently about this at certain points in my life, and other times I also feel like, okay, I think the way I feel about this changes. Okay, so when I see, I do actually, okay, do you know what, I'm going to change what I think. I think that there is more kindness in the world because through, I guess, like empathy, I think we've achieved a lot as a world, and we've kind of improved conditions for a lot of people. That's a very bold statement, by the way. There's also a lot of challenges that we still have. But I do think
so you kind of align with like that kind of Steven Pinker kind of view that actually, you know, violence has reached a historically low level, wealth has actually holistically increased, and objectively we're in the best condition that we've ever been in for the most people.
I think yes, if we're talking about violence in a traditional sense, and no, if we're talking about, I think there's different kinds of violence. There's socioeconomic violence, and when I talk about violence, I mean like marginalization, oppression, and we're seeing that hugely today. I mean, like, you know, we're seeing certain ethnic groups become excluded in certain parts of the world. We're seeing kind of political polarization. We're seeing here in the UK. I think, I don't know if I can objectively say within my own like knowledge of the world that the world is a more kind or more empathetic or better place, but I would say that the violence is different, or the kind of the way that people struggle is different these days.
But the commonality is that lots of people still really struggle. So I guess a lot of what you're saying is how our decisions affect other people. Either people immediately around us, or through politics, people who we don't know on a personal level, but are obviously people just like us, and perhaps even the next generation. So that raises the question, I guess, of a fundamental human nature. You know, there is so much historical debate about whether people are inherently good or whether people are inherently evil or profit-driven. From your lens. Because, I mean, each of those have very different implications, right? If you take the view that humans are inherently good, then once you create the economic and educational conditions, you enable people to express their natural goodness. But if you take the view that human beings are inherently evil and bad, then no matter what you do, people are going to try and exploit and abuse and hurt other people.
Almost like setting a precedent for like how people act.
So I was wondering, from your lens, both from your experience and from your intellectual thoughts, are we inherently good?
Oh my god. You're going to need a philosophy student to answer this.
Well,
oh my god.
You won the John Locke Prize.
Oh god, no. Okay. I think it's a helpful view, in my opinion, for me personally, to assume that humans are inherently good, because it, I guess, allows me to get up in the morning. If I had the perspective that humans were inherently bad people and that we're exploitative, then I don't think I would get out of bed in the morning and do anything, I think. So like, I guess from a personal view, I can't speak, I don't think I can
From a pragmatic perspective, you would rather believe that people are good.
Yeah, because it I think it gets me out of bed in the morning. There's no point in doing anything if I don't feel like there's some kind of benefit, or kind of, I guess collective positive to us, you know, building societies and working and making friends and kind of, you know, and any of that. I think for me personally, while I don't have the answer to, when I don't have like an all-encompassing answer, for me, it's very, very important for me, especially with like I guess my personality. Like I'm very much like a people person. I like to see the best in people. I like to have like faith in people, put my faith in others, and kind of trust people. Because I guess especially this year, I've really seen how like putting kindness and faith in people has kind of made me a happier and I would say better person.
What's the most like meaningful act of kindness that you've ever given or received?
Ooh. That's a tricky one. That's a very, very tricky one. I think. Oh, this is. I don't know if this is a cop-out answer. But I would probably say like
the nomination.
The nomination. That was. Thank you, Angelina. Love you. No, I would say. Oh, this is such a cop-out answer, but I'm just gonna say it. Probably, the biggest gift I've been given is my upbringing. I would say I'm very, very grateful for the way that my parents have parented me. They've made me into quite like a. I'm not always like this, don't get me wrong. If you get me up at 8 a.m, I'm not going to be like this. But I think they've made me into quite like a happy-go-lucky, positive, and like solution-focused person, if I can say that. Obviously, I'm not always going to be like that, but I think my general kind of state of being, I like to see the best in people, and I like to put my energy into other people. I have time for a lot of people because I think over the course of my life, my parents have shown me that putting energy into those kind of things, putting energy into good people, people that return that energy, people that are kind of positive and add things to your life when you give to them. I think that's been probably the biggest act of kindness, probably them giving me that. I think it's helped me a lot, especially in the last few years when you kind of navigate adulthood and uni and gap year and school and just kind of everything. It's kind of equipped me, I think.
That's really cool and that's really beautiful, and I mean there's no doubt in my mind from the interactions that we've had and even reading the nomination, just looking at all the things that you've written and you that you have done in the local communities, that you really care about your community and other people, and just all the different things that you have continued to devote your time to is very inspirational. And it is, I guess, interesting to hear from you that you think your parents have been a major factor of, you know, pushing you to see the goodness in other people and to help other people. And do you want to elaborate a bit more on your parents' kind of serial entrepreneurship background?
Yeah. So my dad. My dad is an entrepreneur. He over kind of his career, he's now 53, I think. He's been involved in loads and loads of different businesses, loads of kind of companies, some of which have been successful, some of which not so much. He's taught me a lot about, I guess, like contributing and giving before expecting to receive. And I guess...
Give and you will receive, yeah.
Yeah, or I guess seeing... Or just giving, in the kind of hope that one day things will kind of come back to you and things will come into fruition. And he works really, really hard, and I think it's set like a precedent for me to want to kind of, to be driven and kind of go after what I want. And also it's given me confidence as well. Like, he's been involved in a lot of different industries. I mean, my dad did a geography degree, just like me, back in the 90s. Yep. And he now does nothing to do with geography. Or to be fair, some of the stuff he does is kind of linked. But he's also shown me that you don't need to have it all figured out when you're 20 or 19 or 18. You really, really don't. You don't need to set your sights on one thing and go after it. Yep. What you want and what is good for you can change over time. So like, for example, like there's been times where he has been like working super, super hard in a job, and there's been times where he's eased back and kind of done something that's more flexible, or kind of there's been times where he's been doing kind of various different industries. So it kind of shows me that you don't always need to have everything figured out. He tells me himself that he doesn't have everything figured out, and he's kind of nearing the end of his...
I guess the stereotype of entrepreneurs or entrepreneurship is that you have to deal with problems as they come about, and you just got to do everything right, because spontaneous and ad hoc things are going to come up. And you mentioned how he has been a part of different businesses. Like, is there an area of expertise or an industry that he particularly, has thrived in, or, just share more about his entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah, so he kind of came into the workplace during the dot-com boom. So in the 90s, when kind of people were starting to create the websites that we know and love, social media, travel websites, things like that. So he was very much, I guess, riding the wave of the internet at its kind of very early stage, like the late 90s to the early 2000s. What is really interesting about that is that that's something that, I guess, he was born in 1970, and no one could have predicted that, right? So like I guess if he was, I don't know, if it was 1980 and he was 10 years old and someone asked him, what do you want to be when you're older? He's not gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna be a entrepreneur with the internet. People are like, what's the internet? What's that? Like, yeah. So I guess that, to me, my personal reflection on that is like...
You can't really know.
I don't think anyone can.
Yeah.
I think there are definitely industries that will remain. I mean, I don't think we can exist without doctors. I don't think we can... Well, maybe they'll become automated, but I think that won't happen for a really, really long time. But that's... In terms of my thinking around my career, I've never been able to give anyone a solid answer as to what I want. And I think that's very much influenced by my dad. My dad has told me repeatedly, you don't need to know exactly what you're doing, and you don't ever...
Which is liberating to know that if you just do the best that you can now, and opportunities will come about, which is kind of how I think go about a lot of my kind of career decisions, where just try my best now and opportunities will show up.
Yeah, sometimes it can be a little bit tiring, I would say. Like, it's really good, and I think it will benefit me in the long... I believe it will benefit me in the long run, not being super set and being flexible as to kind of what's happening in the market, what's happening in the news, what's happening in the world, what kind of products and services do we need, what kind of things are growing, what kind of things are on the decline. But sometimes it is like a bit tiring when people are like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I'm not really sure, like, I don't really know. Maybe something that doesn't exist yet. And then people are like, oh, okay. And a lot of people in Cambridge are very open-minded, but there are a lot of people who are also very career-focused, and that's completely valid. Completely, if people are set on one thing, but it's sometimes hard to explain my kind of fluidity, career wise to those people.
So you did a summer internship at a VC, a venture capital firm. How did you find that, looking at different startups and looking at their kind of innovation?
Yeah, it was really, really cool. I think I haven't had much, I guess Cambridge is a very, very academic uni. It's very research focused. And one thing I felt like I've lacked is like real career insight and real career exposure. And like one thing that I've learned from this internship is how many kind of jobs and roles there actually are. I honestly thought that like there was probably, I could count on two hands the kind of jobs that graduates
investment banking, consulting, and law.
Yeah,
that's it.
And I feel like that's what we kind of get fed at Cambridge.
Yeah,
and some of those, I'm sure people will go and have fun in those, but there's been other things, like especially for me, I think one thing I really want to do short term is sustainability.
Yep.
And I really, really had no idea.
Is that different to ESG?
It kind of comes under ESG.
Okay.
ESG is done with the intention of sustainability. And sustainability doesn't just mean the environment can continue the way it and exist in the way it should.
Yep.
In quotation marks, but also how humans interact with it, how humans live with it, how humans, I guess, receive resources from it and how they kind of interact with it. It's also to do with behaviour, politics and things like that. But yeah, I guess going back to what I was saying, like, I guess Cambridge, we kind of, this internship at the venture capital firm, I kind of, every single day I'm reviewing potential companies that we can invest in. I'm literally scouring the internet, scouring LinkedIn, looking for investors, companies, and I'm seeing every single day I'm exposed to like what people have done and their people's trajectory in life. Like a lot of these people are older and they've had a 20-year, 30-year career. And I look at how their interests and how their passions have evolved.
Right.
And it's just super interesting.
So you're saying a lot of these founders have had multiple different careers.
Yeah.
So they're not like right out of uni they're founding their company. As
no.
The media kind of sells you, if you want to make a difference, then start your company right away.
No, none of the, I guess, I don't want to discourage any budding entrepreneurs. But most of the companies that really scale, it's usually when people have had, I guess, maybe 10, 15 years of industry experience.
The networks you build from other things.
The network, but also an awareness of the pain points of in that industry. So for example, like at my firm, we invest a lot, like one of the categories that we invest in is prop tech, so tech for property. And a lot of the founders that we look at, a lot of the founders that kind of we invest in have had long careers in asset management and property and kind of property renovation and things like that. And they know the struggles, they know where things go wrong usually, or where the kind of tools that would really innovate the industry. So therefore they quit and then start a startup, and they usually have a much higher success rate than someone who's not as experienced. But you do get your kind of college student who but it is more rare. Like that's another thing it's taught me as well.
So I did a VC internship with PwC in my first year summer as well, and I thought I think I had similar reflections to you, where it was just quite eye-opening to see the pace of change and the variety and diversity of the people involved. We use kind of like a starting point with like a 5M framework. Like, you start looking at the market, and then you look at the machine, which is its product, and then you look at its money, kind of its fundraising history, momentum, what kind of awards or what kind of hype has been around it. And then the final point, which I thought was particularly interesting, is like management, because at such an early stage, lots of VC firms and lots of successful investors always highlight that it's the team, it's the people that we're actually investing in rather than a specific product. And I think part of the rationale, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether that makes sense or not, is that because it's such early stage, the world is adapting. The product that you have at the very beginning probably ain't going to be the final product that customers want. It's just going to be a constant iteration of getting feedback from customers, and therefore it's the team that works together, it's the team that complements each other that have the best chance of weathering the storm and persevering and not giving up. So from your research then over this summer, and as you mentioned how people have had these different experiences, what makes a good entrepreneurial team?
I guess I can speak from what I've seen and the kind of people that we invest in. So like, as you were talking about just then, we pretty much, we kind of invest in founders. And that's something that really surprised me. So like we invest in like, what the stage that we invest in, which is seed stage, it's like so early on, it's usually just someone with an idea who's built something and wants to scale it, right? Obviously not everyone is going to be able to scale, and it takes real tenacity, skills, network, and kind of all of these things to really scale your idea. So I guess it's basically when we meet founders, I've met a few founders while working there, and I guess what we look for, we almost kind of have like probing questions that we kind of look for. We look at someone A, with a network, B, with confidence in what they're doing and confidence in other people to help them grow what they're trying to produce, and then also like someone with a lot of industry experience as well, someone who like has a real, I guess, knowledge of the pain points.
Well, I guess I find the point about confidence particularly interesting.
Yeah.
Where it makes sense that if someone is pitching their idea, that they are so confident in their ability and their network and their tenacity. But I've also read a lot about the companies and their histories that have been very successful. And one example might be Warby Parker. You know, the goggles or glasses brand.
Oh yeah.
In America. So one of their anecdotes is lots of investors chose not to invest in them because when they made their pitch, they were particularly honest that, look, this is just an idea, we've all got our backup jobs everywhere, so then lots of people were very put off by it. But the investors that made it big by investing into them said it was precisely the reason that they were honest and that they had backup that showed that these people were serious and balanced people who have the maturity to deal with the changes. And I was wondering, how do you see that tension between being outwardly confident but potentially being ignorant versus being honest but potentially not giving other people that assuredness which almost doesn't exist?
Definitely, yeah. It's all about the balance, really. I mean, I just had a quick anecdote that I just thought of based on what you said. So we were looking at a firm once, and they present to us a deck, right, which is basically just like a kind of quick slideshow of their idea and their kind of how they want to scale it, what channels they want to do that through, who their kind of ideal consumers are, and how big the market is, right? And what was really interesting to us, by the way, this is one of the companies that we like, our VC fund has actually like invested in the past. I was just looking at its deck just to like kind of learn about what a deck is. And the last two, I think it was like 3 slides at the end, were why you shouldn't invest in us. And I just thought that was really, really interesting because it kind of talks about what you were talking about, that kind of honesty and trying to mitigate against the ignorance of kind of almost being hot-headed, that this is going to work, this is going to scale, we're going to grow this together, and kind of firing words. Because when it's at that early stage, you don't really have metrics to kind of
It's like if it's too good to be true, it might just be too good to be true.
Yeah, and you do get a lot of really hot-headed entrepreneurs who have an idea and are trying to kind of throw it at everyone, all hype. So it's really what you kind of talk about. It's just finding a balance. Obviously, you can't work with no confidence.
Oh yeah.
You have to project some degree of confidence, but also, I guess, projecting humbleness and honesty and truth. I think it's so important.
How do you see your personality traits and your interests align with the nature of the entrepreneurial world as you have seen?
I love it. Like, I think it's... I like things that are just very quickly changing and kind of constantly innovating and solution focused. And I think that's really kind of some of the words that encapsulate the entrepreneurial kind of industry. Like, I love seeing people come up with things. It's their idea. They're really trying to grow it and provide it to everyone. Especially in things that I'm personally interested as well. Like, I'm actually writing like a big extended report right now on climate fintech. So tech, fintech, so tech for finance, but kind of for sustainability, or like impact investing, things like that. And I just love
Doing
hearing
good by doing well.
Yeah, that's and a lot of these founders do have that kind of, I guess, whether it's, I mean, it is great marketing to say we're going to be helping so many people with this product, but I do think it's honourable, the kind of missions and the kind of things that these founders and these entrepreneurs want to achieve. So I guess like it's made me, I guess like doing this internship as a whole, it's given me confidence and insight, and it's kind of affirmed a lot of my confidence, especially like in the private sector. I think there's a lot of, especially because I mentioned before, I'm in quite a lot of left-wing spaces. I talk to a lot of very left-wing people, and I took a very, very, very critical lens on the private sector. And while the private sector is right now, like these companies are very unwilling to budge on their admissions, things like that. I guess this VC internship has kind of exposed me to a different side, i.e. how we can use the free market to enact positive change. So I guess back to your original question. Sorry, I've gone on a real loop here, but back to your original question. Like I do think that kind of my positive and my belief in we can get to a new build a kind of better world, quotation marks, through business and ideas and talent and entrepreneurialism. It's kind of raised that thought in my head doing this internship.
That's really fascinating. So I love how you're connecting that practical experience with your intellectual thoughts as well.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the academics is important, but ultimately I think their ideas have to translate into tangible things that actually improve people's lives, right? Otherwise, what's the point of just having a real... Actually, I take that back. There is also value in knowledge for its own sake, but I think it is also good to see some academic or research or policy papers actually being enacted in the real world as they were intended to be. So does that mean that after this internship in particular, you feel like, or actually, do you feel like this internship or the experience you've had in the private sector will change or at least alter your trajectory academically at all?
Yeah, I think so, because I've been exposed to a new echo chamber. I know this word keeps coming up, but it's a really great way of kind of talking about like exposure and ideas. Like I think I'll give an example. In geography in first year we do this. One of my favorite modules was this module called it was like based on sustainable development, and it was kind of critiquing the concept of how we've approached sustainable development and how it's kind of been developed under capitalism, and how we've used this thing called ecological modernization to as our kind of tool. So first, before I go crazy, I'll explain what ecological modernization is. It's basically using technological innovation to drive sustainable change and reduce the impact of the free market and business on the environment. And I took a very critical view of that due to the issues with A, corporate sustainability, and B, with the way the free market has handled sustainability. So what we're seeing is, you should buy an electric car, you should buy these shoes, you should buy these sustainable shoes using these new things, you should buy these reusable cups. And it's a lot of it is like greenwashing, really. Like greenwashing is a huge thing that's happening, and it's able to go unregulated.
So I guess the EU has kind of introduced regulations in the past, or trying to introduce regulations in the past 2 years with like, SFDR, Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, or MiFID II, but clearly not always
there, and
it's hard to judge, right?
Yeah, I mean, in one of my exam essays, I'll just say this, like in one of my exam essays, I talked about the electric car industry. Obviously, there's so much evidence to say that the electric car industry is going to drive emissions down. There's metrics, it's proven. But a lot of the so obviously you need a lot of, what is it, zinc? Is it zinc? I think it's one of these metals that's very toxic to mine. Oh, I can't believe I've forgotten it. It's been too long since I've revised. But basically, it's caused, the demand for electric cars has caused a crisis in Congo is it copper? It's either copper or zinc, I'm not sure. But basically, it's the demand. Congo is basically the place with 60% of this precious metal that is necessary for producing electric cars. Well, they're trying to develop other ways because of how dangerous it's been. But basically, like tens of thousands of people have died in the production of this metal. So mining it goes into their water systems. People drink it, they get very ill. It's caused genetic mutations. It's caused so many issues. And that's partially been driven by the demand for electric cars. And Tesla, for example, in 2021, said that they'll stop using this metal in their batteries. But for a really long time, they used these metals. So that's just
taking that holistic view of their entire process rather than just one metric.
And as consumers, we're so removed from the material inputs of what we consume.
Yeah.
We consume we buy an electric car and we're like, yes, I'm doing great for the environment. But I guess globalization and corporate sustainability and greenwashing have allowed a kind of rift to form between the consumer and the producer, which I think is super problematic. And that's the main critique of this kind of capitalist way of thinking about sustainability. Because it does nothing to reduce our consumption patterns and the way that we consume and the way that we kind of consume at a rate that the earth really can't deal with.
That's really fascinating. And I guess like when it's like something like environment, a transnational issue like that, it seems intuitive that such a global problem requires a global solution. And indeed what has happened, I think, and again, interested to hear what you think, is that like from my own readings, like if you look at like the UN's kind of say like sustainable development with the SDGs since like the 2015, or like education for sustainable development, it kind of outlines this global framework that seems to be like a one size fit all, but it doesn't really recognize the reality that each different country or each different community within each different country has a very different way of life and a very unique set of circumstances that have to be tailored. And what we end up seeing is this, from a colonial perspective at least, a very westernized way of dealing everything through science and so-called objectivity or statistics, but local indigenous knowledge systems have been sidelined. And do you feel like that is a right critique?
Yeah, you've taken the words out of my mouth, honestly. Yeah, so that's a lot of what we look at. Any geographer listening to this will agree that like we try to include, I guess there's been a big emphasis in our course about including alternative perspectives on these issues, particularly drawing on the experience and knowledge of indigenous communities. There's a statistic that's been going wild in the news recently. 80% of the world's biodiversity is governed or managed by indigenous people. So why are we, I guess, some people argue, I'm not saying I fully agree with it, but some people are arguing, why are we listening to professors in Oxford and Cambridge on biodiversity when a lot of these people sit in offices all day and kind of write things and look at statistics and use the kind of traditional method of science and kind of testing and controlling things, when there's actual indigenous people who actively interact with the landscape, they manage resources, and they develop.
Also that, like, I think, like, personal meaning and connection. Like, I was reading some case study about like educational pedagogies where children were more encouraged to be in nature and to like write from their child's perspective of what they think would be good for their community, rather than just purely taking an expert's perspective. And some of the things that children have mentioned have been truly awe-inspiring and truly fascinating, and some of it intuitively may seem unimportant. I remember one of the case studies that I cited in one of my essays was this child mentioned just how important a particular local like cemetery or playground actually is, but from a pure objective standpoint, you would just think, well, this is just a space that we can destroy and build buildings or change it. But the child was mentioning how on a weekly or bi-weekly basis for years and generations, people have met here and played here, and this has such strong significance that if a high-up official who doesn't understand this just came in and redeveloped the plan, that it hurts the local people because their entire routine and ways of life are being altered. And I found that to be particularly fascinating, that what may seem right may not always end up in good outcomes.
Totally. Like, this is why I really, really am a strong advocate for having people that work the land, interact with the land, and interact with natural spaces in institutional power. Because currently, a massive problem is perspective. I mean, a lot of these people who create the laws, create the guidelines, are not taking into perspective, in my opinion, some of the most important perspectives. And that's people who interact, I guess, like,
and
really...
it can't always be quantified, I guess.
Yeah, and it can't always be quantified. It is, at the moment, because we're doing sustainability as kind of like... we're trying to keep up with it, but I think we can really change the whole paradigm of how we approach it if we get more Indigenous people and more people from persecuted communities, people who have directly experienced the kind of vicious, rough side of climate change. And I'm talking here about people who've been displaced, people whose islands are sinking, people who have had their house blown down by, intensified monsoon. These are the kind of people that need to be in institutional power, and the people that, in my opinion, have the, I guess, tenacity, but also perspective to enact change. And we're starting to see that. We're starting to see at COP27, COP20, I forgot what it is, COP27 to COP26, one of those. That's bad, I should know which, I don't know why. Anyway, we're seeing at that conference some inclusion, but to me, it felt like kind of tokenism. Like, it felt like, oh, here we have an Indigenous representation of, I don't know.
It has to be an active process.
I think it should be an active process, and it shouldn't be inclusion. I think it should be embedded into our kind of decision-making process and how we approach and think about the environment. Not just what we do, but how we think about it and how we teach others. You talked about education, like, I feel really passionately about that.
You're going to love your papers next year on the concepts of like Anthropocene. And
love it. Oh, yeah, it'd be great.
I guess one of the key ideas that we got exposed to in the education tripos is the idea of like a pluriverse by Escobar. I don't know if you heard of
No, I've never heard of that
as well, but essentially it's just like the idea of that actually, right now what we're seeing is that our approaches to these transnational issues are, universalized, is economics driven, profit driven, and very delocalized.
Yeah.
So then it's natural to then just critique that entirely and then say, well, everything should be local. Then you reject the new advances that we can get from science. But pluriverse kind of advocates for like, we should approach it where there are like multiple worlds that can coexist and can complement one another, where the Western progressions have also, the scientific hegemony has also contributed new methodologies to examine something, but we also shouldn't neglect the voices that are often marginalized, but thinking about a way to complement and collaborate rather than to just yell at each other when neither alone are enough. And it's obviously an idealistic vision, but how do you feel like conflicting or seemingly conflicting perspectives or solutions can not only coexist but complement one another in the context of the problems that you want to solve?
Yeah, well, I love that idea. Wait, what was it? The pluriverse?
Pluriverse, yeah. Escobar.
I'm going to go read that. Thank you to who like, did you just find it, or like?
Oh, I did. So in third year you can pick a paper called Transnational Sociology.
Cool.
And one of the modules in there was on like environmentalism.
Oh, thank you to the education department of Cambridge. Thank you. I will go and read that. That sounds really, really interesting and very relevant to a lot of the stuff I love to read about and just kind of interested in. I honestly pretty much, that perspective really kind of encompasses how I feel. I think that we shouldn't see these kind of perspectives at odds with each other, but they're both necessary. They're both valid and necessary and have made contributions. I just think there's a huge imbalance, a colonial imbalance in the way that we value Western knowledge on environmentalism. And I think the start of that is embedding people who have not historically benefited from those kind of colonial power imbalances of environmental power and knowledge in these systems. So like in the UN advisory committee positions, or kind of in big institutions, or kind of I think that's quite idealistic, but I do think that that's a start. That's like the start for me, I think. And then when these people are embedded, and when there's an active endeavor to like include these people, and when their knowledge is put into the way that we approach things and the way that we think about things and the way that we educate people on the environment, I think we'll see an acceleration of like impact, if that makes sense.
And I love this idea of like embedment, which, you know, visually in my mind, I can appreciate that once you are actually, you know, on the ground, you get to feel and you can use your senses, and it's just particularly, I guess, pertinent when you're actually involved. And for you as well in your gap year, actually taking the initiative to go to Ghana, I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate on your experiences of embedding yourself in very different environments to what you had grown up or been accustomed to.
Yeah, honestly, to anyone that's listening to this right now, please, please, please go and volunteer abroad. Like, I know there are lots of issues. There's the way that kind of Western organizations operate in developing countries. There's been a lot of stuff with kind of Western organizations and aid and kind of how that's caused it. But I do think that for anyone, especially interested in international development, human rights, environment, I would love for everyone to go and volunteer abroad, because I think it's really, really changed my life, to be honest. Like, I think I spent 4 months in Ghana, 4 months, and then I spent another 2 months in Nepal. And like, it really has changed me a lot. I feel like I've also made an impact there.
Were you always like destined to take a gap year and to do that, or did it just come about more organically?
I finished school, so I did a gap year, so I finished school in 2021, and I was very, very, even though I did well in school, I mean, like, you know, I had I had the grades to apply to Cambridge, like, it was all hypothetically a success. At that point, that was a very, very low point in my life. Finishing school, having COVID kind of like run rampant, a lot of my friendships that kind of I had throughout school, a lot of them really just kind of fizzled. Some of them broke down, and that was a very, very low point, and I felt very uninspired. I felt very kind of I had a very negative outlook. I felt like I didn't feel like myself anymore when I finished school, just for a number of reasons.
Wow.
Like,
so other people wouldn't have known, because they would have seen that you've achieved such great results.
Oh,
into Cambridge.
yeah. Well, yeah.
Yep.
I actually applied to Cambridge during my gap year.
Okay.
So I kind of was, I did do a UCAS application, but I was just kind of like, dumb. Yeah. But anyway, so I got to the end of school, and I was just very dissatisfied, and I was talking to my mum, and she said that she thinks that I just need to get out of my bubble, my echo chamber. I love this word. I'm going to keep drumming it in, and just live and immerse myself in something completely different. And, you know, my mum was never able to do that when she was younger, but my dad actually took a gap year, and he said he still talks about it today. You know, 100 years later, no, I'm joking. 30 years later, he still talks about it. He talks about how it taught him more than any career, any kind of job taught him. Obviously, everything's transformational. It's all a process of learning. But he talks about how the people he met have just been like, and the kind of things he did were just transformational in his life. So I was like, I want to do this. I want to go out on a limb. And that was kind of my last hope, almost. Bit dramatic, but... and I was just like, and I honestly went online. I was like volunteering abroad. I was like looking at like long bus tours through like Asia. I was going to go on like a 30-day bus tour, and I was just like, and I saw this like volunteering program in Ghana. I was like, well, I've never really thought about going to Ghana, but I was like, let me just apply. Yeah. It was quite expensive, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be blowing my money that I have for my gap year, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and do it. And I originally booked for 2 weeks. That's the crazy thing. And I ended up just loving it so much, feeling like what I was actually doing had some kind of tangible purpose and meaning, and that I was feeling like I was doing something that actually mattered. Because, you know, like grades, I felt so getting grades, getting a good grade, keeping up in school, getting uni offers. I felt at that point in my life so disillusioned by it all. I was like, why am I even doing this if I feel so miserable? And like, I went to Ghana and I was doing something that wasn't academic. It wasn't to advance my own career or life or chances.
But ironically it did.
But like, to be honest, but it was so much more impactful than any Cambridge offer or any kind of A star or any
so you just felt like every moment mattered at that point, which you didn't feel right after school.
Yeah. Everything, I feel like everything I did there I felt like in my element. Wow. Like I felt like I was doing something that actually mattered to me at that point in my life.
Yeah.
I'm still very happy now. Like I feel like what I'm doing at Cambridge and pursuing education matters, but I value it more because I had that other side of the coin, doing something that wasn't academic, getting off the academic treadmill of life and getting off it, getting validation from somewhere else and being like, okay, I've got my validation from somewhere else and I feel like I can do good in another aspect of my life. Let me return to education feeling like rejuvenated and motivated to like, I guess, like take it on.
That's so cool. And what were you doing there? Why was it so meaningful?
Yeah, so I was actually working as a teacher. And I was working as a volunteer teacher. I was teaching. It was quite chaotic, to be honest, looking back. I was basically told to show up on my first day and teach a lesson. I was 18 at the time. My birthday's quite late in the year, so I basically just turned 18 like 4 months before. And it was so intimidating.
What age group?
It was 10 to 13-year-olds.
Okay. Good age group to teach.
Oh God. Oh my God. It was manic. Like I had to break up fights. I had to break up it was quite a challenge, to be honest. Trying to, and also like compared to the Western curriculum, the Ghanaian curriculum is really, really different. It's so different in so many ways. There was a lot that surprised me, but it's so different, and having to, I personally don't think I should have been doing this, but there was just a lack of teachers. So like when there was only one teacher in the school that we were taught at, and there was like, I don't know, 60 kids, right? So before there was volunteer teachers deployed out there, it was all the kids basically learning from a textbook in one room. It was an old disused church hall that we were kind of occupying, right? And when we got more and more volunteer teachers in, we kind of managed to divide the classes up. So I was teaching 11 to 10. My friends were teaching like preschool, like changing nappies. Like it was chaos. Like we were basically just being thrown. We would have these meetings every day. Be like, do you want to teach this? Cool. Do you want to teach this? Cool. And then I'd have to like revise their curriculum. So I was learning their curriculum the night before and then teaching it to them the day before or after. And like long term, they've managed to get like actual qualified Ghanaian teachers in, but and a lot of people also have told me when I tell them this experience, like you shouldn't have been teaching, like why you're not a qualified teacher, but like I have to explain to them that like there was literally no one. There was like all the teachers, a lot of them went back to their villages over COVID. COVID wasn't a big killer in Ghana, but it was really economically
heightened that social inequality.
It really, really did. A lot of people, for example, China has a huge economic tie to Ghana. A lot of people's jobs, a lot of the industries, a lot of people's supply, like what they're selling, is very much tied to the Chinese supply chain and the global exports. And over COVID, that was really, really, really disrupted. So a lot of teachers went back to their village and didn't kind of come back because I guess they weren't being paid enough to stay. And it kind of led to a lot of educational kids basically not being in school for 6 months, kids not being in school for like a year.
And to see that live and, to see the chaoticness and experience it and be a part of it and being embedded in your words is very different to just reading statistics that, the wealth gap has widened or, did you feel like, I wouldn't say you realised the problem because, of course, we always grew up knowing that there are inequality, but how does seeing it visibly affect your mood and your emotion on just how tangible these issues are?
Yeah, I guess, like, I'm a big believer in learning by doing, and I think you can read all you want about international development and inequalities and education, But I think the best way to really get a good grasp on it is just by doing. Like, I was in the position of a teacher filling in for a real teacher, having to, like, bust my ass trying to get, like, lessons prepared the night before. And, like, I guess when you actually put yourself into it, put yourself in these situations and play a part in that kind of environment and that, like, almost, like, social ecosystem, that's when you learn what these challenges are. Like, it was really, really, really hard.
And was that one of the, like, would it be right to assume that that was one of the rare moments in your life when the way you look and just you're a minority?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. I do think, though, like Ghana, I think we actually have a lot to learn from them in terms of the way that we approach diversity. So, like, Ghana is a multi-faith country. It's Christian dominant, but there's also a large Muslim population. There's also people from kind of tribal faiths. And, like, I think they kind of coexist in a very different way to how we do. There's less kind of identity politics there. I think because they're at a different developmental stage, potentially. But I think there's a sense of camaraderie between different religions there. So that was really nice. Like, I had kids from all faiths in my class, and there was no kind of interfaith issues, and it wasn't...
And those kids were practicing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it was honestly, like, my experience in Ghana taught me a ridiculous amount about, like...
Where were you living?
So I was living in a volunteer house. Okay. Actually, it kind of changed throughout. So I signed up for this volunteer program. Looking back, in my opinion, it was more kind of volunteerism. Like, we'd go and volunteer during the week, and then we'd go on a trip on the weekends. We were going to some fun places. We went to, like, some beach resorts.
It was fun?
It was so much fun. Like, it was so much fun. I will never forget.
Who did you do it with? Did you make good friends?
Yeah, random people. So, like, honestly, I didn't know anyone going out there. There were people of all ages. There were people of age 60. There were people... I mean, there was someone there who was 70. Wow. And then there were also there were a few gap year students. I met some very, very, I think, lifelong friends out there. One person I want to give a shout out to, she actually goes to Cambridge. Maddie Wright, she's a Queen's historian, and she goes to Cambridge, and we met out there, and we met, it was towards the end of my time in Ghana, so it was like, I had I guess a month left, and she kind of walked in, and she was like, "Oh, hi, what's your name?" I was like, "Oh, I'm Andre, what's your name, Maddie?" And she was like, "Oh," I was like, "Oh, so are you on a gap year?" And she was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Oh, are you going to uni after this?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, so where are you going to uni?" And she was like, "Cambridge." And I was like, no way have I just met another Cambridge offer holder in a Ghanaian village. Like, it was crazy. And since then, like, we went traveling after that together. We went to Indonesia together. We've been, like, inseparable. She's now climbing a mountain. Like, she's a very, very special person to me. And we, she was there for me when I was, like, literally dying. I went to Indonesia with her after we went backpacking. And she was there for me when I was, like, dying in a hospital because I had I got really, really ill when I was out there, and for 4 days I was like, and I basically got told I had dengue fever. Long story short, I didn't have dengue fever. I was just very ill. I realise I'm going on a tangent here, but we have a special kind of friendship that's very different to anything I've developed in my past life. So, like, through school, through my childhood, but also like at uni as well. It's like that gap year, I spent a lot of it with her, and we kind of have that kind of shared bonding thing, and it's just amazing that she's here at Cambridge with me.
Wow, that's so incredible.
It's so cool.
So during the week you were working, during the weekends you were going on the sightseeing stuff. Was it a pretty predictable life, or did anything chaotic or random happen?
Oh God, it was chaos. I can't even tell you. Like, it was some of the stuff that happens out there. You just have to keep an open mind to everything, and then also be prepared for the unpredictable to happen. It was a real cultural experience. I quite like to tell one crazy story, and I like telling this story because it helps me process it. Right. It was actually my last night in Ghana. And basically, to put it bluntly, I'll give you some context. I basically got kidnapped. I got held hostage. I fell into a tourist scam. I'll tell the full story. So I kind of it was the last night, and we were all kind of celebrating. I had a flight to Nepal the next day, like in the morning. So I was kind of ready to leave. We all went for a nice dinner to kind of celebrate me kind of leaving. It was a pizza restaurant. It was nice. Like, it was really, really good. Then we went to a bar, and we were kind of told, okay, curfew is at 9, right? You need to come back by 9. And we were just we were a bit done with the rules. Like, I've been out there for so long. I also wasn't officially part of the program. I was kind of, at that point, I'd moved out. So I had an apartment out there with 2 of my friends, these 2 girls from Ireland, called Claude and Shauna, who are also very special people to me. I hope they listen to this. And basically, it was about 10. We had missed the curfew because we were just a bit done with the rule. Like, we were just kind of like, we felt like we were being babied, basically. So we kind of walk up to the road, and a very normal thing to do over there is just get on someone's motorbike and give them the equivalent of like 50p, and they'll take you home. That's a very normal thing. Not a normal thing in the UK, but very, very normal to just get on the back of someone's motorbike and they'll charge you like a set fee, right? It's very normal. We used to go back and forth from the schools on motorbikes, right? And I was with 4 other girls, and then it was me and my friend Tom, right? And we managed to, there was not many motorbikes at all that night. There was barely any cars on the road. It was quite late. It was like 10:30 at this point. So we found a taxi. We got the girls in the taxi, and then me and Tom were going to get on the back of this guy's motorbike. So we go speeding down the street. There's a police station that's in the way between where we're staying and where I was like getting the taxi from. And we went right past this police station. Sometimes they do checks on tourists to check if they have drugs, because there's quite strict drug laws there. Nothing. The police don't stop us. We're free, right? We go all the way through until we get to this kind of dark area, right, where we have to go through. Suddenly the bike like crashes on the side of the street. Not that fast. It kind of like went like sorry. I just realized I did like a hand motion, and it's a podcast. There's no video. It kind of swerved onto the side of the street, and we had these 2 men screaming at us, saying that we're under arrest and we're breaking the law and that we're going to jail for 7 years. And I was freaked out. Like, I was in kind of happy, slightly tipsy mode. Like, I wasn't tipsy really, but I was kind of in a very happy mood. It was my last night. It was almost euphoric. Like, it was my last night volunteering for 3.5 months.
And then you're going to stay for another 7 years.
Oh, God. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want to stay for 7 years. I've got a uni offer. I've got things to do. I've got a flight to catch the next day.
Defer for 7 years.
Yeah, I was like, oh, God, they wouldn't let me, honestly. Mitigating circumstances. Sorry, I'm in jail for 7 years. So can I just come in? 2028? Is that okay? Let's say no. And then basically I had this massive argument with them, but I could see that they were I think they had weapons. Not like pistols or anything, but they had like a knife or something like that. So I was like, I'm not going to mess with this. I'm not going to run off. I could have potentially run off, but that would have been risking things. So I was like, I'm going to comply with what they're doing. Me and Tom would basically walk through the entire town, and they said that they were taking us to the police station. However, because they were and they were also doing all these funny acts, like they were pretending to call the inspector, or they were basically I was like, can you show me your police license? Can you show me like that you're a policeman? And he kind of got this picture up saying, oh, I'm an off duty, but do you want to see my badge? And I was like, this is obviously fake, but at that point I was really scared, so I just believed it, right? So I wasn't able to really get away because I was being kind of shouted at and almost like intimidated. So we walked to the police station, but they weren't actually walk into the police station. They took us into this dark alley around the side of it, into this kind of enclosure. There was no ceiling, it was just kind of like that. By this point, I wasn't really able to get my phone out because I was worried that they would like retaliate, right? So I realize I'm going on about this, but basically I was held there for multiple hours. I managed to sneak out my phone and get kind of the boss, the director of the NGO that I was working at, GVI, to bring his car. And I told him, look, honestly, if you can get a car here so we can kind of get in it and get off, like speed off, that is enough. Because that's a short distance to run from where we were kind of being held to where the road was. That's a short enough distance for me to run, get in the car, and do that risk-free. But I can't run all the way back to the base on my own because of something might happen, right? If I was to sprint, it'd probably be about 10 minutes. So like that's, I mean, I don't know, you know, I'm probably not fit enough to do that. So I was like, no, I just need, and then so I wait for an hour, and then he texts me and he says the brake, something in his car was broken. So I was like, great, your car has to be broken on the time I get kidnapped. And you've got 2 of your volunteers basically being held hostage by a tourist scam, being told that we're going to jail for 7 years. It was awful. Like, it was so awful. So we were just kind of standing there, and I was trying to, like, talk them up. Like, they were Ghana's a very religious country, and they were very religious themselves, and they told them that kind of, they were also trying to get us to pay, like, a bribe. So they were trying to get us to pay 17K for this guy's motorbike, because the driver, who was actually in on the whole kidnapping, they told him that they were trying to make it out to us like his bike had been confiscated and now he has no work and now you've just taken away his work. They're trying to gaslight us basically, and trying to get us to pay 17K for this guy's bike. And we were like, oh, like, so sorry. And they were like, you need to repent. And then we're like, we promise we will repent. We'll go and think about this and reflect deeply on it. Like, I was really trying to just play around with words, really. Like, I was just trying to say anything to stop them from shouting, because I was just trying to keep the tension low and trying to use my way of words and kind of charm him out of it, right? Looking back, I actually think I did quite a good job of doing that. Like, I really managed to keep him occupied for about 2 or 3 hours. So it gets really late in the night. It's really late in the night. There's not a single person walking past. So I'm like getting worried now. He says that he's called the police commander of Accra, so the capital city. Bear in mind, our village that we were staying in was about an hour and a half outside of Accra. So I was like, great. They're sending in this like huge police car. This like, I mean, when it got there, it looked like an armored vehicle. Like, it was crazy to come and rescue these like Brits from this kind of tourist kidnapping scam. And yeah, it was like an hour and a half, and they finally got there. But God, it was scary. But yeah, I think, and then the next day I had to catch a flight. So I almost missed my flight, not because of the thing, just because I was being useless. But it was a lot and then the flight lost my bags as well. So it was just basically, I think it was I consider myself quite like a brave person. Like, it takes quite a lot to faze me with kind of stuff like this. And I also think I haven't fully processed what happened, but
it's traumatic.
Yeah, I do think in some degree it is, and it was really scary because it made me like, and I feel like I haven't really processed it fully, but this year I have been. And the more times I can tell this story to people, the closer I get to like accepting what actually happened, I think. Because when it happened, I had a flight to catch. Like, I had to get on a flight to Nepal and start a new position as a volunteer teacher. And like, there was all this stuff about losing my bags. Like, it was crazy. And like, I just didn't really process it. I didn't have any time. But like, now I look back, it's actually such a significant thing that's happened in my life.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't take anything, I think I take so much less things for granted now that happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very just, yeah.
Yeah, when I tell people that, people have such funny reactions, like, because I try and tell it in a very like kind of smiley, it wasn't that deep way.
Yeah.
Because that's my way of dealing with things. I wouldn't consider myself I would consider myself a reflective person, but I wouldn't consider myself a serious person by nature.
So I guess like, for your confidence then, on the one hand I can see this being like, wow, you know, if I've survived that and if I've, you know, been relatively calm under those kind of situations, then nothing can really faze me anymore. But on the other hand, I mean, it must, you know, back to the original question, are human beings like inherently good or bad? But for something like that to have happened, it must surely dampen a bit of confidence in just your interactions with the world. And, you know, you're trying to do so much good, which is really admirable, but then there are just so much evil out there. And how do you balance your own self-interest and safety while also... I don't know, how does that affect your confidence?
Ooh, so do you know what? I like, that's a really interesting question, because I had the time of my life while I was in Ghana. So many happy, emotional memories. Like, I remember my last day at school, I was like bawling my eyes out. Like, I was literally, I felt like I'd built such a close connection. I'd broken up fights. I'd been teaching in this kind of super hot classroom all day, And there are kids that I would walk them home a lot of the time. Like, I built such a close relationship with these kids, and the kids were so grateful for all of the volunteers, right? It was such a close, and so much of my heart is still in Ghana. I know that's cringy to say, but like, so much, like, my heart really is there. I'm desperate to go back.
Wow.
I hope life allows me to go back for an extended period of time. But I guess based on the question that you actually asked, that experience almost like kind of in the short term really affected my perception of the village and the place that I had so many memories attached to, positive memories. It kind of was like, okay, like that wasn't a good experience. Like, that was really damaging. That was really scary. And it was my last night. It was a very like emotional, tension-filled night in a positive way. And it kind of instantly was like switched to being a negative thing. And like, it's taken some time the more I process it though, the more I can appreciate the wider experience. It's about contextualizing it. Like, one bad day doesn't mean that something that you've worked really hard to.
We always have this psychological bias of just
thinking about. I'm not going to let one bad experience, I guess, detract from probably the thing that I'm most proud of, which is spending that time out there and doing what I did out there. That's probably one of the things I'm most proud for. I'm not going to let some people with bad intentions detract from that.
Nepal and Indonesia were relatively safer.
Oh, I wish I could say. I wish I could tell you that it was all fine, but I went on I'll make this story a bit shorter. It's not this story isn't okay. So I went on a weekend trip to Chitwan National Park, which is a famous national park in Nepal. It's on the south, so it kind of borders with India. So it's a very famous national park. People go there to see tigers, rhinos, wild elephants. Like, it's an amazing, beautiful place. We went there for the weekend with me and 3 other volunteers who I was teaching with. Or some of them were actually doing like a women's empowerment program as well. But I went there with 4 friends. And I think something got lost in translation when we had a travel agent who was booking stuff for us. I think something got lost in translation because we were meant to go on a 1 hour or half an hour walking tour through the forest, because we didn't have any like formal training. Like, if you want to go on a longer safari, you need training, right? Somehow, when we got there, we were told to get there at 6, and we were like, that's a bit weird, 6 a.m. And then basically we were on this 6-hour walking safari. So we went right into the thing. And basically he was like, oh, I assume you've been briefed. And we just kind of looked at each other. We were like, oh, like, have we? But then we were just kind of nodding because we were excited to see animals, and we were excited to walk through the park. So we walk, and we see like loads of stuff. We see a rhino. And we had a guide, right? And the guy, he was such a lovely guy, but bless him, I don't think he was totally with it that day. And there was one time when we were walking through this clearing, and I think everyone was looking in every single direction except for right in front of us, and there was like a rhino that was walking towards us. And when you see a rhino, with the only advice and training we were told, and it was just kind of an offhand comment, it was like, if you see a rhino, run and climb a tree. And we were like, oh, we're never going to need to do that. But we, never thought this would happen. But, it's one of those, like, when they tell you, like, training as, like, almost like a precaution, like, I don't know, if there's an apocalypse, get in a basement, or, like, when they tell you training, just as and you never think it's actually going to happen.
Yep.
There was a rhino walking towards us pretty quickly, and rhinos are tough, like, they're big animals. If you don't get out of their way, they will, like, he was telling me that a lot of his guides, like, he loses multiple guide friends a year. It's a dangerous industry. Like, these guides risk their lives. And there I was, having a rhino coming towards me. And, like, we were really lucky there was a tree that was easy to climb. I know it's a podcast, but I wish, like, I took some pictures up the tree, and there was a rhino, like, probably 10 meters, 20 meters away from where we were, just waiting for us. And we had to just wait for it to just, like, keep walking away. But, yeah, that was the Nepal scare. So, like, yeah.
Indonesia?
I got really, really ill in Indonesia and basically got told I had dengue fever. I didn't have dengue fever. Dengue fever is very dangerous, by the way, if you don't know it. It's kind of like, it's similar to malaria, but it was basically just like, I ate some bad food with my friend Casper. Another guy who goes to Cambridge as well, Casper, he was out there in Indonesia with us as well. and me and Casper went out one night and ate some very dodgy food, and both got very, very ill. And then we both ended up being very, very sick, but I ended up literally not being able to do anything for 4 days, and I had to get hospitalized. And then they actually like hospitalized me for a different disease which I had, and they told me, you're going to be here for 5 to 7 days. And then they ran a blood test, and they were like, oh, sorry, the last blood test was faulty, you can leave now. And I was like, but yeah, those are the big 3 scares, I think, and also one in each country. It's almost kind of like
everywhere you go.
Everywhere I go, yeah.
So, had you not...
Sorry, I know these are quite extreme things, but yeah.
So, had you not taken that gap year, you would have gone to uni without all of these experiences, and everything would have been really completely different. I can imagine each of them alone, let alone them combined, would have shaped your character. Like, you'd be a completely different person after this, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think like it's those experiences, and alongside many others, like there were other experiences in between that, kind of littered in between, which were also like pretty crazy. So those are the 3 kind of big ones.
So like, you going back from these trips and seeing your old friends who seem to knew, or they at least think that they knew you quite well up to that stage, did they notice a change in anything, or did you feel like you had potentially, say, more of a duty to share what you had learned and what you've experienced? Like, how did those interactions change because of this?
Yeah, I think it was different. So like my best friend from home, Michael, he's been my friend through school like for about 8 years. I've known him for about 8 or 9 years now. He's a great friend. He, like, when I was kind of meeting with him on my gap year, he actually studies in the US. He studies at UPenn. And when I spoke to him, he told me that I seem happier, I think. And like I seem more like I think he said something along the lines of like, you seem happier and more like I guess mature and grateful. He said something along those lines to me. Like he said I seem like
you found yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I think that was kind of somewhat what he was saying to me, and I like that was very touching, and I think honestly very true, because I think those experiences have like almost blew my narrow life perspective of you know being in a competitive school and trying to get 8 stars and trying to get into uni and trying to get into Cambridge and it blew those things that I thought were the end all and be all out of the water. Like it was kind of like I was like, oh, actually my life is being threatened here. Oh, actually I've had to climb up a tree to get away from a rhino. Oh, I'm actually in a hospital in Indonesia being told that I'm going to be here for 7 days and I've got dengue fever. Like that's the experiences in life, and putting yourself out there and doing things that you are not in your comfort zone is in my opinion the real point of life. That's where you get your satisfaction, and that's where you really like almost like see what life has to offer, when you kind of live on that kind of edge of your comfort zone, when you kind of ride that edge of your comfort zone. Wow,
very profound. I mean, you can read all about these things, but again, like, until you actually
just do it
in there,
Nike.
I mean, I'm not sure if people listening to that is that inclined to actually go do it.
No, guys, yeah. Listen, if you go to Ghana, listen to the curfew. If you're in Nepal, stay away from the rhinos, and if you're in Indonesia, don't eat the dodgy food. That's my travel advice for everyone.
At that point, you like. I know music's obviously a big part of you, and being a choral scholar would have taken years of dedication and practice. So when you went to these places, was it a form of outlet? Did you continue it, and because music is often tied to the context and the time and place and your own personal development, and what role did music play as you were outside of your comfort zone?
To be honest, I kind of lost. I know I said that music has been a constant in my life, and it has. But on my gap year, that was the first time where I didn't really do a lot of music, and it made me really miss it. Like I don't think I would have applied to be a choral scholar at Homerton if I didn't have that year where I wasn't doing much music. To be honest, I really just didn't have the opportunity.
It sounds like the one of the recurring threads is we don't appreciate what we have until we lose it.
Exactly.
And then we desperately want it back.
Like, for example, when I was traveling, I was having the time of my life, but I missed reading things and hearing people's ideas and debating interesting things and education. So like I think I've had such a better year at Cambridge, my first year. I'm so grateful for doing all these things on my gap year, because it made me miss education, it made me miss learning, it made me sitting in a lecture hall and listening to what experts had to say. It made me grateful to read a book, whereas in school I wasn't grateful. I really wanted to just sleep the whole time, to be honest. And like same with music, like I didn't do a lot of music in my gap year, and like it made me, I'm actually going to do this seriously. I'm going to audition from the choir and take that leap, you know, and I just think I've got so much more appreciation for choir and being a student.
I think that's important to have, and you know, so many people complain at Cambridge, but you know, if you speak to alumni, they say that period is one of the best times of their life, and once you start work, lots of people really miss the sense of community at Cambridge, and for you having that almost concrete realization, I guess you can use that insight and knowledge to really enjoy the next 2 years at Cambridge.
Yeah, and it's given me so much perspective on not taking everything so seriously. Seeing, like, I guess drawing upon the things I've talked about, these crazy stories that I've talked about, like, I've seen how extreme life can get, and I always have to remind myself when I'm not feeling that great about my degree, or feeling really stressed or sleep deprived, or not feeling like I'm making any progress, or not feeling good about my education. I'm a student and I'm learning, and I have nothing to lose here, right? When I've been in situations where I have a lot to lose, my health, my safety, my sanity, I mean, I sometimes lose my sanity at Cambridge as well, but that's besides the point. When I remind myself, look, this is important, sure, but it's not that deep. Like, we obviously we all have a duty to try our best. We've been given the honor of studying somewhere beautiful, amazing, and kind of cutting edge. But I also, having that gap year and having those other experiences has reminded me constantly that this is really like not the be all and end all, and I guess contextualizing everything that's happening and everything I'm doing here. It's not that serious, and I should be kind to myself sometimes in that way because of that.
That's fascinating. And so right now at uni, like, how much music do you do, and also do you are you there to keep getting better, or is it just something that you've reached this level that you're just trying to maintain it?
Oh, I don't know. If I don't know. I hope someone's listening from choir and they'll agree with me when I say I'm definitely always learning. I.e. like I'm not gonna lie, like my school choir, it was good, but there wasn't that much emphasis on like learning to read music or producing a good sound. Whereas Cambridge choir, like, it's run like the military. Like, you need to show up and you need to be prepared and you need to know what you're doing. You need to not mess it up, because we're preparing a service every week, and we have 2 hours to prepare it. Like, Homerton's one of the low commitment choirs where we don't do too many. We only do one service a week. We do Tuesday evensong, and then we kind of we do a practice every Friday, and also we practice before the service. It's not much time to practice a lot of material, and it is really difficult. There have been times in choir where I've been like, this is harder than my actual degree. Like, I've been like, oh, this is so hard. Why do I keep messing this up? And I'm also very nervous as well. It's going to be this year especially, it's going to be a huge learning curve, because there's I think there's like 6 bases, and I think 5 of them have graduated.
Okay.
Or are moving on to do other stuff. Like, some of them are medic students and are doing their placement next year. So it's I know there are a few more people joining, but I guess I'm probably going to be the only person with that choir experience and trying to carry the baton over, and that is something that makes me so nervous. Like, I'm so nervous about it. I don't want to let people down, and I want to do music. Now that I have this appreciation from when I didn't do music, I want to do it well, and I want to do it to a high standard. So I think this year is going to be a huge learning curve.
What other goals have you got for the next 2 years of university, other than trying to be on the B dot list?
Oh God, no. Other goals. I think there's things that I want to continue doing. I think one thing that I told myself, which kind of ties into your philosophy of this whole podcast, and something I really wanted to talk about, was having time for people and showing like kindness and like showing kindness to people and like making the effort with people, right? Like, I think one thing that's made me really happy and has actually kept me sane at Cambridge is the social circle that I have and the friends that I've got. And I think this is not something that I had during school, like a positive circle of people that like really uplifted me and made me feel important, made me feel good about myself when I wasn't feeling so good about myself, lifted me up, people that you can just go and talk to and inject energy into your life. And that's something I think I've developed this year, and I want to keep developing that. I want to keep, inviting people for formals to like come to Homerton. We'll have a formal, or let's get a coffee. Or I think making the effort and showing kindness to people and reaching out to people, especially when people aren't in the best point of their lives, that's something that I found has dramatically, and offering to give before you receive is something that I found to be like transformative in my life, like especially, and I think it's punctuated by university experience.
Wow, that's really cool. Would David Goodhue be very proud to hear that?
I hope so. He's actually left the school. That's just for context to the listeners. David Goodhue is the head of my school. He was a great head. He's done a lot for social mobility. He managed to get it so that I think 25% of students at my school were on like a 100% free bursary. Still a long way to go in my opinion. And I think while the school was good, I think that it has a long way to go with becoming like an inclusive and environment which I felt like I could thrive in. But I'm just so happy to be at Cambridge with the circle of people that I have, learning about something that I'm passionate about and I genuinely believe in, and also having the perspective from my gap year to really like make the most and be grateful for what I'm being presented here, I think, is what would sum up my first year of reflections.
That's so good. I guess in, the context of giving you a legacy-worthy interview, something that captures a snapshot of where you are now. You've had so many cool experiences. We've touched on a lot of different facets, but is there anything else that you feel like is particularly important that you want to keep in this recording, or else I'll wrap up with some questions?
Important I want to keep in the recording. I hope I can listen to this in 10 years and see a different world where we approach environmentalism different. And that's one big part, I guess, at the academic side. And then on a personal note, I want to listen to this in 10 years, 5 years, whenever, 20 years, 100 years, hope I last that long, and feel like I've made effort with humans and people and like gone the extra mile for people that I care about. And I want to kind of continue this concept of giving, which is something that I've consciously decided to do during my gap year and in uni. And I want to just continue it because I think it's made me a happier person and it's made me a more stable person. It's lifted me out of quite a dark period of my life where I wasn't necessarily happy. And I hope I can keep that up despite what might happen, because nothing in life is guaranteed. But I hope I can keep that constant of being kind to people and showing my affection for the people that I care about. Because I think if I forget that, I think my life will not turn out what I want it to look like. It's almost kind of like putting pressure on myself and listen to this back and be like, keep that up and don't forget that, even when you feel really crap about yourself, or even when you feel like the whole world is like hates you, or when you feel like the whole world is out to get you, it's having that kind of belief in other people and acting on that belief in other people.
Of that very, very uplifting and positive message. A round of rapid fire questions then. What are some nicknames that people have given you?
Oh my god. So Andre is a very difficult name to nickname but I want to give a shout out to my year 6 maths teacher. Probably one of the most, he won't be listening to this, but
you can send it to him. I
could send it to him, but I need to reach out to him actually, because he's probably the most impactful teacher of my life.
What's his name?
His name's Mr. Hodge. And he was my year 6 maths teacher, and he very much believed in. I don't know if he'll agree, but he very much did the kind of tough love thing. So I got in big trouble with him once for cheating in a maths exam.
Okay.
And
so you didn't like him at the time?
I was scared of him at the time. He gave me the nickname the Ponch, kind of stemming from my surname Pancholi, because he was South African and he used to say Pancholi. Like I can't do the South African accent, but he used to pronounce it like that, and then I was used to be like, it's actually Pancholi, and then he would be like the Ponch. But he, you know, I remember him, like he once had me. I know these are meant to be quick fire questions. I'm going on a rant here, but he had me. Once I got him, after that whole incident cleared up and we kind of worked it through in his office, you know, I had the stern telling off, and then I was crying and I was really upset about it.
Wow, so you were scared again?
I was scared. Like
scared
I was
of being expelled, or your
No.
reputation?
But I did get sent out of the class, and I got basically sent to my teacher. And I got sent to another classroom.
I'm sorry to bring up old wounds, but
no.
how did you cheat?
It was when I was 10. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait, what's the question?
How did you cheat? Did you just like look over?
I was looking at my friend's paper,
and he saw you looking.
Yeah. I wasn't exactly doing a very good job of hiding it, but I was also 10, so like, yeah. But I think he, like, once, like, I got him, I grew to really love him after that whole incident happened because of how he handled it. It was tough love, right? And then I went to Canada in that Easter, and I went to this maple syrup festival, and I got him a bottle of maple syrup from Canada, and I just gave it, because, you know, like, when I was in primary school, I was a bit of a teacher's pet. I used to like love getting gifts from my teachers. Like I loved I loved like being in school, and I found it a very good place for me.
Yeah.
And when I was there, I just gave it to him, and he was like, "Oh my God, thank you so much!" Like he loved it. And then once he called me, we were rehearsing for the school play, and he called me up to his office. I was like, "Oh God, what have I done now?" Because I'd got in trouble with him before, and that's what happened. I had to go to his office, and he basically took me up to his office. And we had waffles, maple syrup, and ice cream, and he had this freezer.
Wow.
And we just had a nice chat in his office, and he made me waffles, ice cream, and we had maple syrup with it. Like, so I'll remember him forever.
That's so cool.
He's a teacher who really, like...
When educators break that hierarchical barrier and just connect with students, it's so incredible.
It's so cool. Like, I will never forget that, I think, throughout my whole life. He's an incredible teacher.
Did that, you know, kind of tough love but genuine care, how did you or did you even contemplate that or try and leverage or transfer that when you were a teacher in Ghana, when some of the kids may not be objectively high performing? How did you go about connecting with those kids, and most importantly balancing their long-term future and their long-term interests with the immediate interaction, which, you know, for like in your case, for example, if he just wanted to be nice to you, he could have just not punished you with the cheating, but that would have cheated you out of your future. Because
exactly.
So
good.
How did you?
I definitely did a lot of tough love in Ghana. I had to get like these kids had not been in school through no fault of their own, had not been in school for 6 months because the teachers left because of COVID, right? And I had just come in when society was kind of, Ghanaian society was just getting back together, piecing everything back together, getting people back into their workplaces, and it was a transitional point in the country's kind of developmental trajectory. And I was kind of there at the...
Did some of those kids, I mean, I know I did a first year paper on like language of instructions, and I know that in lots of African countries that these kids speak their native language until year 4, even in school, and then at around year 4, age 10, 11, they then become taught in English. So most kids actually just don't really have a great solid foundation in English, but they have to sit in class and basically not understand. Was that a problem at all with language of instruction?
No, there were people in Ghana speak perfect English.
Okay, so that was fine.
Yeah, there are. I would say there is a dialect of English that is there, and it's kind of infused with, but I guess the colonial legacy of England. Sorry, the UK being in Ghana. Business is done in English. Pretty much education is done in English. The textbooks are in English. They do have a lesson every week or multiple times every week where they learn Ga and Tree, which are the two most prevalent languages in kind of tribal languages in the region I was teaching in. But English is very much the kind of all-encompassing national language of, I think it is the national language of Ghana.
Okay. So still on that point of tough love, like it's great to think about kids' long-term future and, you know, be disciplined, and but also I can imagine, as you were mentioning, how if socioeconomic contexts were rapidly deteriorating in COVID, there's an element of uncertainty of you don't know how kids are affected from home, for example, if their parents have lost their job, or lots of kids perhaps haven't had breakfast. And
that was a big.
And I was wondering how what kind of issues did you see firsthand, and how did you as a volunteer teacher feel an overwhelming sense of responsibility? Was everything within your control?
So that was one of the huge lessons, knowing that I am a volunteer and I'm a human and I don't have a teacher training. I can't solve everything. And that was one of the huge lessons that was really, really difficult. There were times where I wanted to show endless amounts of love to the kids, but I couldn't. Like when they go home and when there are issues at home, there were lots of issues that we had to deal with, but there were none of them that we could necessarily. Some things you can't do about because you're imposing yourselves on people's private family situations, and it's also so important. We as Western people don't go and impose our ideals of family and relationships and discipline on people. You know, these people don't want that. So you have to kind of know where to draw the line, and that was a tough line to draw. I think there were times where I wanted to there were times where I literally just wanted to spend all day with the kids, but you have to take them home and you have to trust that things are going okay. And
are you religious? Because a lot of those kids are religious, so they would be praying or they would be talking about God. But are you personally religious?
I'm not personally religious, but Ghana completely changed my perspective on religion.
In what way?
From negative to positive.
Negative as in...
I felt quite cynical towards it and I didn't buy into it.
So you were it's tied with colonialism, crusades...
kind of. I just didn't really see the purpose of it in my life because of the echo chamber. I don't keep coming back to the word, but it's gonna be like Andre Pancholi, the echo chamber. But I guess neither of my parents are religious. No one. I mean, part of my family is Indian and they're Hindu. Some of them are quite religious.
And what did you see of the role of religion in those kids' life, and why did it change it to become positive?
So religion and hope was such a massive part, and
they genuinely believed that God was on their side and God was there and looking after them, and there was something. They had a purpose. Their life was going in the right direction.
More some than others, but I do think that their religion, it was a community thing. It was something that united people and got people up in the morning. You know, it was something that genuinely helped people, and I had no experience of that before I went. And while it didn't motivate me to personally become Christian, or while it didn't motivate me to personally, I have an immense appreciation for it, I think.
Wow. That's so cool. It's really, again, interesting that you had put yourself outside of your comfort zone to see a different way of life, and to have the courage to admit that your views have changed, you know? Yeah.
So totally. No, seriously, I used to spend, you know, as I said, I spent a lot of time online in kind of left-wing spaces. A lot of them are very cynical of religion, and cynical of the role that it's played colonially, crusade-wise, used as a tool to control people. And while I do agree, some of that still I have, when you actually live it...
Are those things more done in the name of God, or does God really advocate for people to go and kill other people?
I personally believe that, my opinion is that God is someone who would want people to come together.
To love.
And to love, yeah. And that's what changed for me. I even though I don't personally I don't personally believe in a deity or any kind of god or anything like that. When you actually live in a community that's religious, and you inevitably have to take part in religious things, like our school, it was a Christian, all of the school, like it was called like the school actually we were teaching in was a church, and like it was an abandoned, it was actually a used church, and religion was embedded into every aspect of life in Ghana, and God and faith and hope and all these kind of ideals, and you can't avoid it. But I saw it, in my opinion, as a net positive, and I can't deny I can't impose my own view on religion on that. And when I kind of saw how it kind of shifted, and people going to church and how positive that was, and how happy it made people, the smiles I saw, while it didn't make me want to go and join, while it didn't make me want to go and take on these belief systems, I can't deny that it was, in my opinion, a community building thing, and it was a net positive for people. It gives people hope.
So would you say you're like an atheist or agnostic? Is like what I mean. Like if you're atheist, like you're sure that there is just nothing beyond what we can see or mathematically perhaps prove, whereas agnostic is, look, there might be, but I'm not sure at this point. Where do you sit? Like, could they actually be right?
Yeah, I think I'm personally agnostic.
Alright, so they could be right.
Yeah, but I do also think that at my age, with my wisdom, with my life experience, I personally don't think, the way I see it personally for me is, I don't think I'm in a position to make such a huge...
You don't believe we can know, or at least you right now...
I don't believe I personally right now
can
know if there's a god, or if there is multiple gods, or if there's... I really... And
Do you think about these though? Because that's, the implication would be huge.
Yeah, I do think about it a lot, but I've accepted... The reason I'm an agnostic is I'm okay with not knowing that. I don't need an answer to that. All I hope, and my hope for the world, is that people use these systems and use these beliefs in a positive, community building way, and that's what I saw in Ghana. But I personally can't say whether there is or isn't, and that's because I don't believe it's my position as a human in our world. You know, I don't think I have the knowledge or the expertise or the insight to state whether there is or not. But as long as it's being used, and clearly in Ghana it was, as a way to bring people together and as a net positive, like I'm all for it.
Cool. Back to rapid fire questions.
Yes, that was a long tangent.
What is like the best investment that you've made that costed less than £100 but had a disproportionate impact on your life?
Spotify.
Now you can listen to your podcast.
I can listen to myself, but I was more going along the lines with music. I think music is such a beautiful form of self-expression. And Spotify, I guess, there are a lot of issues with Spotify, artists not getting paid, everything like that, but it's democratized music. It's opened my eyes up to so much music, so much incredible music, so much artistry that I never would have found. Like, you can listen to like old records from the 60s, you can listen to 90s R&B, you can listen to like the most weird, obscure, hyper pop remixes. Like, you can listen to anything on Spotify, and having that, all of that incredible artistry at the tap of your finger, I think is mind-blowing. Like, I think it's so much artistry. I hope Spotify learns to value the artistry of these artists, pay your artists, but from a selfish perspective, that's the best investment I think I've made. A Spotify subscription, no ads as well.
What's your favourite genre of music?
Beyonce, I would say. She, like, in my opinion, she's a whole genre in herself. But to give a serious answer, I would say pop and R&B. I've also started listening to some alternative stuff as well.
Have you ever written a song for someone?
A song for...
Or
I actually have. I used to write songs when I was like 10 about like stupid things. Like when I was mad at my dad,
You'll write a song.
I'd write a song about it, and then I had this. Well, it was actually my sister's, but there was this piano that my sister got. It was like one of those kid pianos, like those plastic ones, and I used to just go upstairs and I used to bang chords. I taught myself
to show your resentment.
To show my resentment, and they were like angry songs. They were like, well, not that angry. They were like, looking back, I think if I got the notebook out,
it wasn't always love and romantic.
No. It was frustration. It was an output.
Music was a form of therapy.
Music is a form, very much so. I haven't, since when I was younger, I've never written a song. I think I don't know. I think I should, maybe. I think that'd be fun.
What's your hidden talent?
Hidden talent? I can clap really, really fast. Like, I have very flexible wrists.
Do you want to show me?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, this is good for a podcast because they'll be able to hear it.
Yeah.
But I can do it just wait.
Do you need a warm-up?
No,
okay,
it's fine.
Let's go.
Right, I'll try and clap non-stop. I know I'm going to fail this because I've set myself up. Okay, ready. Right.
Very impressive. Very impressive. What is your favorite movie?
Oh my god. I'm not actually a big movie person. I appreciate movies for what they are. I think at the moment, I think I like movies that are very escapist and emotional. I think I'm not a big film hack. I love this is such an awful answer, but the kind of film that I want to watch when I'm with my friends, in my basement on the sofa, drinking wine, eating popcorn, is the Titanic. I love the Titanic. I love how dramatic it is. I love how stupid it is as well. I love things that are slightly cringy and really cliche, but predictable in a kind of post-ironic way.
Salty or sweet?
Sweet.
Dogs or cats?
Cats. I've got 5.
Fresh food or fried food?
Oh my god. Ooh. Fried food.
Final rapid fire question. What's your guilty pleasure?
Oh my god. I like buying coffees and walking through very expensive areas of London and romanticizing my life. Just living and all the architecture and just going on a walk and
So does owning lots of money, is that potentially something? I mean, there's no shame if you want that, but
no, I just like it for the kind of London is such a beautiful city, and I love just money isn't. I don't know if money is something that really motivates me at this point in my life because I'm somewhere relatively. I'm at a secure point in terms of I'm a student. I have a student loan. I'm paying it. But money isn't a huge driver at this point in my life, and I'm trying to keep it that way because I just want to be a student and be happy. But with regards to what I was kind of talking about, I love just walking through London and in a beautiful place and just going on a walk, headphones in, listening to the music that I like, and just being on my own. A lot of people actually have a misconception about me is that I'm very extroverted. People think I'm quite an extrovert because I like to talk a lot and I like to meet new people. But I'm actually very much, I would say, an ambivert. I really appreciate spending time with myself and being in my own world and just taking things in at my own pace.
Sorry for the past 2 hours.
Oh, it's fine. No, I'm probably gonna get up tomorrow and just do nothing and talk to no one. No, but I really love that balance. I think that balance is something that keeps me sane, and it's how I operate, I think, as a human. I love spending time with myself and just doing things where I can be in my own world.
And I think it's very clear that you're a deep, critical, creative thinker, and you probably have lots of things that you don't always get a chance to vocalize, and big questions and big ideas. So I guess maybe for the second last question, I'm going to give you a minute, and so when I clap, I won't be able to clap as fast as you. I'm going to clap, and then I want you to, in that minute, say as many questions that you're thinking about or want to answer in your life, either short term, medium term, long term, just anything, just burst out questions and thoughts and just what do you want answered, and almost like, yeah, go.
Oh my God. Okay. I would like to know what I'm going to be doing in 50 years, what my career is going to look like. I'd love to know like where university is going to take me. I'd love to know what's going to happen next year. I'd love to know what the rest of my life is going to look like, especially with regards to my parents. I'd love to know like what as they get older, what our relationship is going to look like. I'd love to know what my relationship with my siblings is going to look like. I'd love to know what kind of friendships persist through the uni years. I'd love to know what the world looks like with regards to the environment, politics, development. I'd love to know what it looks like then. Oh God, I've got so many questions. I'd love to know if my core values as a human being change. I'd love to know if they shift, and what caused them to shift. What kind of serious realization happens. These are all questions that I think about all the time, every day. Maybe not every day. That's a bit of a stretch. But I think about these questions a lot. And I don't mind the uncertainty. I think I don't mind not having the answers, because I think life is just something that happens, and you just have to deal with it when it comes and not think about it too much. It's too much stress.
That's wonderful. Well, I guess the final question, as you know, kind of all the things that you have experienced, you know, a relatively sheltered upbringing, you know, before your gap years, but being, you know, very good at things like music, but you know, very good at academically, especially, you know, with writing and with thinking, and having that kind of niche in sustainability and, you know, global development, politics, social media. For you to have gone to such an academic school, and I'm assuming you would have done the interviews at age 11, and would have been quite a stressful process. But you're one of the successful ones. I had a read of your school history, which seems fascinating. I think it's really cool that, you know, your headmaster had really made it more accessible, so that you know, it's becoming more diverse.
I hope it continues that way as well.
I'm quite sure your new headmaster was the first woman, like, lower master at Eton. So.
Oh wow! Okay, we'll see how that shapes up.
I guess for you to, you know, achieve all those things in high school, perhaps not having a grand purpose and just kind of going about life and just, you know, just taking it easy
along the conveyor belt.
But still getting good grades. You know, doing overall quite well, except in year 6 when you were cheating, but but, you know, building those kind of good relationships and what's his name again? Your year 6
Mr. Hodge.
Mr. Hodge. You know, being scared of him, but really connecting with him at the end, such as like in his office.
Tough love.
But then for you to really, you know, finish your high school and to embark on such an adventurous experience in Ghana, in Nepal, in Indonesia, going outside of your comfort zone, spending the week teaching without a teaching qualification, with kids from all sorts of different backgrounds, having faith that you at this point don't share, to see how they live and how they interact, to really, you know, be overwhelmed by the extent of the social inequality there, such as, you know, some kids having family issues, but you learning as an 18-year-old how to draw that line of, you know, being professional while also being personable and loving, and, you know, building that relationship, to meet Maddie and other people on that trip who has, you know, you built a special relationship, and to travel with them later on as well, and to share that memory and experience, for you to then, you know, be held hostage and trying to escape and use your eloquence to hold them up and try
blabbermouth came in handy.
But then to have not a fair amount of time to perhaps process it, and, you know, in reality it's such a traumatic thing that I understand that even now it's something that you would continually like to think and to process it, but you seem to have the opportunity with friends at university and your good kind of circle to feel like what you have gone through matters, and that it's okay to not know. For the Rhino incident in, you know, Nepal, you know, being stuck on the top of the tree, you know, having that healthcare in Indonesia, you know, to basically escape that healthcare, to escape the Rhino, to escape the 7 years of jail time that would have tremendously detrimented your career growth.
Yeah, God.
to have those anxieties about the future of not knowing, but to have the conversations with Dad, who from his own experiences is confident that, you know, that you don't need everything figured out at this moment, but, you know, the world will adapt and the world will change, and the excitement comes from this sense of uncertainty, and you are in a good position, obviously, and having done the venture capital summer internship and realizing just how much diversity there is, and just how sometimes people need to acquire a bit of life experience and industry experience before they can make it big. So success is not something you can always cheat.
And it's not linear as well.
It's not linear as well. It's diverse and it's different and it's exciting and it's unique. For you to, you know, develop your interest in geography, thinking about environmentalism, thinking about social justice, and thinking about how the uneven distribution of social, economic and political opportunities continue to affect people's lives, and the kind of innovations that we'll need to address these kind of, you know, pernicious slow violence almost, that day by day we may not see the impact, but eventually it has catastrophic effects. But for you to really want to affect that, to come into Cambridge as a choral scholar and to experience that sense of discipline and that sense of routine and that sense of professionalism, and really trying to take a goal of developing yourself and more appreciating them after having gone through all the things that you've been through. When you think, and obviously for you to take on like the different roles at university, like, you know, VP of the Geography Society, being a student representative, being welfare officer, publicity officer, trying out different things, doing consulting, you know, business and all of those different things. If you were to take it holistically from a bird's eye view of all of that, what's like one message, quote or saying you wish like every teacher, every educator in the developing world context, or maybe that kind of distinction you would rightfully question, just any people of influence, of responsibility should promote, and every child should internalize and truly believe?
I think I can sum up in one sentence, or like two maybe actually. Take a chance on people, because what you give, you might not know what you're going to get back, but I found in my life that, like, so far in my 20 years of existence, that putting energy into the right people is what's going to make you happy, and what's going to get you up in the morning. It's what's going to punctuate your life. You know, our life is punctuated by people and like how we interact with them and our connection with them. And then the other thing would be, I guess, put your faith in life and not need to have all the answers, but be willing to try something different that's outside of your echo chamber, outside of what your trajectory might want to look like, or might be expected to look like. So like, you're just not on a linear path, but you're kind of just be okay with the unknown and okay with doing things that are outside your comfort zone, and being open to what knowledge and wisdom and what I guess growth that brings to you. I think.
Well, Andre, I want to thank you for coming into my bubble and coming into my echo chamber for a little while.
It's going to come a slogan.
And I think you model so much of the goodness that we should all appreciate more of humanity, of that genuine interest in, you know, contributing, you know, learning by doing, you know, of humility. I think the number of turning points that you have been able to acknowledge of your own perhaps naiveties, perhaps your own weaknesses, but to kind of grow from each of these experiences, and not only grow from it, but to take that and try and help other people. And I was particularly, you know, touched by kind of the love that I can so palpably feel that you had for those kids who you were helping, and you really wanted them to have a fantastic future of equal opportunity, and for them to live in an environment and world where, you know, the future generations can really not be so disadvantaged by our present actions. And I think your genuine care and compassion for people who you don't even know on a personal basis is something that we should all aspire for, especially for us having this tremendous opportunity of studying at an institution like Cambridge.
Definitely.
And I also love, I think, the way that you think about how you can invest more into other people, such as like next year inviting more people for formals or coffees and recognising.
I've got a list of people that I want to get into Homerton. Come on, you get 2 bottles of wine included. Everyone come.
I think you should just find someone running for election at the union and get their list.
Oh God, yeah.
I think it's been lovely to finally meet you in person after hearing so much great things about you. Just seeing all the things that you've done. So I hope you've enjoyed the experience.
I've really, really enjoyed it. I hope I can listen back to this and stay true to some of the things I've also said, but also realise that I'm also like learning, and like some of the stuff I say now, I'm going to look back and be like, oh, I was so naive. I was so stupid for saying that. Why did I think that? I'm completely different. So I hope there's both of those 2 things. But yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me on this. I love this podcast. Like, I think it's so cool there's so many really interesting people with a lot to say and really good at articulating it in Cambridge. Like, that's just a fact. Like, there's so many cool people, and I think you do a very good job at, I guess, like bringing that out of people and asking the right questions. So yeah, I'm very happy I did this, and thank you very much.
Thanks for being one of them.